They did not ask politely. They never did. The message arrived wrapped in ancient ceremony and modern arrogance, translated into every known human language at once, echoing across satellites, screens, and emergency broadcast systems. By right of ascendant law, it declared, the species designated human shall provide 1,000 living sacrifices within one standard cycle. Failure will result in planetary correction. You are awake when it happens. Not because of the alarm, those start screaming seconds later, but because something deep in your bones recognizes the tone. That tone civilizations hear right before they stop being civilizations. Pause. Before we go any further, if you enjoy Humanity Wins Without Apologizing stories, tap subscribe, stay with me till the end, and tell me in the comments who you would send to negotiate with an empire that eats planets for breakfast. Now breathe, because this is where humanity makes its mistake, or rather where everyone expects us to. You sit in a quiet room beneath Geneva, 3 kilometers of reinforced bedrock above you, watching the same message loop again and again. Around the table sit generals with stiff backs, scientists with shaking hands, diplomats already calculating how many lives a delay might cost. The aliens call themselves the Varelian Ascendancy. They are old. Older than human civilization by a margin so obscene it feels insulting. They do not conquer with fleets. They conquer with law. Every species they encounter is given a choice. Obey the ascendant law or be corrected. Correction is a polite word for cultural erasure, genetic pruning, and orbital sterilization when patience runs out. Thousands of worlds bear their stamp. 1,000 sacrifices, they say, is mercy. The room argues. Some want to fight. Some want to stall. Some quietly, shamefully want to comply. You don't speak yet, because you already know something the Varelians don't. They believe law is a weapon. Humans believe law is a battlefield. The Varelian envoy arrives 3 days later, descending above the Pacific in a vessel shaped like a judgment rendered in metal tall, geometric, impossible to mistake for anything but authority. They do not land in Washington. They do not land in Beijing or Moscow. They land on neutral ground, where the oceans meet, and declare the meeting site a temporary tribunal zone. That should have been the first warning. The envoy calls itself Arbiter Keltve, a being encased in ceremonial exoskeletons, layered with glyphs older than mammalian life. Its voice is harmonized by machines that project inevitability. You have been measured, it says, looking down at you through lenses that catalog heat, pulse, and fear. You are found wanting. You finally speak. Under which jurisdiction? The room stills. The arbiter pauses just a fraction longer than protocol allows. The ascendant law, it answers. You nod, as if satisfied. As if that explains anything. Then, you say, folding your hands, we formally request arbitration. The translators hesitate. The generals look at you like you've lost your mind. Arbiter Keltve tilts its head. Your species lacks standing. You smile. Not because it's funny, but because this is exactly where you wanted it. According to which clause, you ask? The silence stretches. Because no species has ever asked that before. The Varelians don't rule by violence alone. They rule by precedent. By rules written so ancient, no one remembers they were once negotiable. You continue, voice calm, steady. Humanity acknowledges receipt of your demand. However, under interstellar norms, including your own archive decisions, we are entitled to representation during any tribunal affecting sapient extinction thresholds. The arbiter's lenses flicker. You watch its internal processors churn. This isn't defiance. This is paperwork. Behind you, a screen activates. A list scrolls into view. 1,000 names, not prisoners, not volunteers, not soldiers. Arbiter Kelt VA studies them. These do not match sacrificial criteria. No, you agree. They're not sacrifices. You lean forward. They're lawyers. The reaction is subtle. A fractional spike in processor heat. A delay in response latency. Confusion pure. Undiluted. You misunderstand, the arbiter says. We require biological termination. You misunderstand, you reply. We require legal representation. The room hums with restrained terror. You explain patiently, as if addressing a difficult child. Each individual on that list is licensed to practice law under at least one recognized human jurisdiction. Many under several. They specialize in treaty law, rights of sapient entities, procedural abuse, historical precedent challenges, and class action litigation. You tap the screen. They're very good at what they do. Arbiter Keltvi straightens. Your defiance is noted. Not defiance, you correct. Compliance. You slide a data shard across the table. Under your own ascendant law, subsection 973, any demanded sacrifice may be substituted by an equivalent burden if the offering species can demonstrate proportional cost. The arbiter processes. Slowly. Too slowly. Explain, it demands. You smile wider. 1,000 human lives, you say softly, represent a tragic but finite loss. You gesture to the list. 1,000 human lawyers? You let the implication hang. They represent an infinite burden, because lawyers don't die quietly. They argue. They appeal. They footnote. They file injunctions against gods. The Varelians have never faced a species that weaponized interpretation. The arbiter rejects the substitution, formally, immediately, which is exactly what you expected, because rejection triggers review. Review triggers delay. Delay triggers jurisdictional overlap, and overlap is where lawyers breed. Within hours, the first petitions are filed, not against the demand, but against the process. The ascendant tribunal systems, ancient and automated, begin to choke, because no one ever thought to limit filings. Thousands of years of rulings flood back into relevance as your lawyers dredge up obscure precedents from extinct civilizations that once argued successfully that sacrifice quotas violated proportionality doctrines. The Virelians respond by escalating. They issue a final notice, orbital assets reposition. You receive private messages from panicked allies begging you to stand down. You do not. Instead, you authorize Phase 2. The lawyers go public. They broadcast arguments across open channels, not to the Varelians, but to every subject species watching. They translate ascendant law into something dangerous, understanding. For the first time in recorded history, lesser civilizations realize the rules can be read both ways. Arbiter Keltvi returns, furious. You infect the order, it accuses. No, you say gently. We're auditing it. Behind the arbiter, systems begin issuing automatic notices. Caseload exceeded tribunal backlog. 4,712 years. The ascendancy has built an empire on law that assumes obedience. Humanity introduces resistance through compliance. And somewhere deep in Varelian archives, an ancient failsafe awakens, one that has not been triggered since before stars had names. Because for the first time, the law itself is under threat. And this is only part 1. You learn something important about empires the moment their paperwork starts screaming. Not alarms. Not weapons. Paperwork. Across the Ascendant network, ancient adjudication engines machines older than many stars begin issuing alerts, They were never designed to issue. Process overflow? Precedent conflict. Jurisdiction loop detected. You watch it all from the same underground chamber, coffee going cold in your hand, as a galaxy-spanning legal order begins to choke on humanity's favorite export, interpretation. The Varelian ascendancy has always believed law was gravity inescapable, crushing, absolute. They never considered friction. Your lawyers do not sleep. They can't, not because they are heroes, but because they are predators in their natural environment. Briefs fly faster than kinetic rounds. Motions replicate like bacteria. Every ruling the ascendancy ever issued becomes ammunition, stripped for parts, reassembled into something sharp and deeply inconvenient. One of your teams discovers a ruling from 9,000 years ago, involving a silicon-based hive species that successfully argued collective personhood exemption. Another team digs up a half-forgotten clause defining sacrifice as a voluntary ceremonial act, not an enforced extraction. Someone else finds a footnote, just a footnote stating that ascendant law must not produce systemic instability within subject populations. That one causes a stir, because instability is spreading. You see it first on secondary channels, encrypted chatter from vassal species, whispers slipping past firewalls that have never before been challenged. If humans can argue, can we? What if the law is not divine? What if it can bleed? Arbiter Celt V returns again, this time without ceremony. Its exoskeletal regalia is gone. What stands before you now looks less like a god and more like an exhausted administrator holding together a collapsing bureaucracy. You are corrupting the foundation, it says. No thunder. No harmony. Just something dangerously close to strain. You built the foundation, you reply. We're just reading the fine print. Behind HFY, the tribunal's projection field flickers, showing cascading delays across thousands of active cases. Entire conquest cycles grind to a halt, not because of rebellion, but because no ruling can be finalized while appeals stack into infinity. The ascendancy does not rule by fear alone. It rules by timing. Decisions rendered swiftly, punishments applied immediately. Momentum has always been their greatest weapon. Your lawyers have stolen it. You must withdraw your representatives, the arbiter says. This substitution was never intended. You lean back. Intent, you say calmly, is irrelevant without enforcement. Celt V's lenses narrow. Then enforcement will follow. That is the moment you have been waiting for, because enforcement requires escalation. And escalation requires authority. You nod. Understood. Please file the appropriate motion. The arbiter freezes. Because to escalate under ascendant law to authorize correction, sanction, or force, it must submit a justification of necessity, which can be challenged, which triggers review, which triggers more lawyers. The ascendancy's fleets remain idle, engines hot but leashed by their own rules. Their commanders are trained to obey the law absolutely, and the law is now arguing with itself. On the fifth day, the first subject species defects. Not militarily, legally. A bipedal amphibian civilization from the Kesh spiral submits an amicus brief supporting humanity as interpretation of voluntary sacrifice. 2 days later, a crystalline trade collective files a motion demanding equal access to tribunal representation. Then another. Then another. The ascendancy has conquered thousands of worlds, but it has never had to convince them of anything. Now they are watching their subjects learn the language of refusal. You receive reports of riots, not against human embassies, but against local ascendant offices. Clerks assaulted. Yada vaults seized. Glyph-marked officials dragged into public forums and forced to explain laws no one has ever been allowed to question before. Arbiter Keltve requests a private session. You agree. The chamber seals. The projection field dims. For the first time, there is no audience. You do not understand what you are awakening. Keltve says quietly. The ascendancy exists to prevent chaos. You meet its gaze. No, you say. You exist to manage it, the arbiter's processors hum. If law collapses, worlds burn. Not collapse, you correct. Reform. Keltve leans forward. Your species is young, emotional. You mistake cleverness for wisdom. You smile thinly. And you mistake age for legitimacy. Silence. Then, something unprecedented. Keltve hesitates. You are not warriors, it says at last. No, you agree. We outsource that. The arbiter studies you, and for the first time, you sense calculation, not superiority. Withdraw the demand, you say. Recognize humanity as a protected negotiating species. Open the tribunals to external review. That would unravel everything, Keltve replies. Good, you say softly. The arbiter straightens. If we refuse? You tap your console. Then the class action proceeds. Keltve's systems spike. Because buried beneath the avalanche of filings is the most dangerous thing your lawyers have done so far. They have consolidated every challenged ruling, every coerced sacrifice, every erased culture. One case, one plaintiff class, thousands of civilizations. Filed under ascendant law itself, the ascendancy has never been sued. Never imagined it could be. You weaponize law like a contagion, Keltve says. You nod. We call it precedent. Outside the chamber, something ancient begins to stir. Deep in the ascendancy's core systems, a sealed protocol activates a last resort measure designed for exactly one scenario. Not rebellion, not invasion, but legal deadlock. It is called the final adjudicator, a construct so old its creators are myth, designed to resolve irreconcilable contradictions in the law by rendering a single, absolute judgment. Once invoked, its decision cannot be appealed. Ever, the ascendancy prepares to wake it. Your analysts detect the activation within seconds. The room tightens. Generals finally speak. This thing, whatever it is, can it overrule everything? You nod slowly. Yes. Then we lose. You shake your head. No, you say. Then we get a judge. The final adjudicator activates across dimensions, its presence rippling through subspace like a verdict forming before the trial has even begun. It summons all relevant parties, including humanity, including every species that has filed under the class action. For the first time in galactic history, the ascendancy must defend itself, and you send your best, not soldiers, not diplomats, but a human lawyer with tired eyes, a calm voice, and a brief so thick it bends light. As the tribunal assembles, Arbiter Keltve watches you with something like dread. You will break the system, it says. You shrug. No, you reply. We'll just prove it was already broken. The final adjudicator begins to speak. And somewhere, across 1,000 frightened worlds, entire civilizations lean forward. Because if humanity wins this, nothing will ever be the same. The final adjudicator does not arrive. It manifests. Across every registered tribunal node, across light years of jurisdictional space, reality bends into a single shared chamber, an impossible courtroom, stitched together from probability and law. No walls, no ceiling. Just layers of symbols, rulings, and precedents, rotating like a slow, patient galaxy. You feel it more than see it. Pressure, finality, The sensation of standing in front of something that has never been wrong, because nothing has ever been allowed to survive disagreeing with it. The Varelian ascendancy kneels. That alone sends shockwaves through the assembled civilizations. Arbiter Kelt Ve lowers itself without being ordered to. Its species evolved, kneeling out of their biology long ago. This is ritual, not instinct. Humanity does not kneel. Your representative stands. No armor, no flags, no theatrics. Just a human in a dark suit, sleeves rolled slightly up, holding a data slate scarred by 1,000 annotations. The adjudicator speaks, its voice layered with the echoes of extinct languages. State the matter. Kelt V answers immediately. A subject species has obstructed ascendant law, weaponized interpretation, and destabilized order across governed space. The adjudicator turns. Subject species, humanity. Response. Your lawyer does not rush. They take a breath. Your honor, they say, and the word honor ripples across the chamber as a defined legal term. We complied. Murmurs ripple through the assembled observers. The lawyer continues. We were ordered to provide 1,000 sacrifices. We substituted an equivalent burden, as permitted under Ascendant Law subsection 973. Our representatives participated fully in tribunal process. They pause. The system failed. The adjudicator processes. Clarify failure. The law, the lawyer says evenly, collapsed under its own contradictions. A bold statement. A dangerous one. Kelt V snaps back. Your interference revealed, the lawyer interrupts gently, not caused. The adjudicator raises a construct arm. Silence becomes mandatory. Your lawyer gestures, and suddenly the chamber fills with history. Worlds, species, sacrifices rendered in cold legal phrasing. 1,000 years of compliance without consent. Ascendant law claims universality, the lawyer says, yet exempts its authors. Claims stability, yet enforces terror. Claims justice, yet forbids appeal. They step forward. We did not break the system. We used it. The adjudicator's symbols accelerate. Precedent indicates order preservation as primary objective. Correct, the lawyer agrees. And we submit evidence that the ascendancy has failed that objective. They display projections, riots, halted conquests, tribunal deadlocks, subject species openly citing law to resist. Order maintained through unchallengeable authority is not order, the lawyer says. It is suspended chaos. Kelt V's voice cracks. Without the law, there is war. The lawyer turns to the arbiter. No, they say softly. Without accountability, there is inevitability. The adjudicator falls silent. This is the moment. Every civilization feels it. The ancient construct begins running its final function. Irreconcilable contradiction resolution. If ascendant law is perfect, humanity must be erased. If humanity is correct, ascendant law must change. The adjudicator speaks again. Query. Does ascendant law permit its own amendment? Kelt V freezes. Because the answer has always been assumed, never tested. The lawyer answers first. Yes, they say. Through precedent, the adjudicator processes. Precedent requires survival of challenge. Exactly, the lawyer replies. Symbols collapse inward. For the first time since its creation, the final adjudicator encounters a recursive truth. A law that cannot survive scrutiny cannot preserve order. A law that cannot change must eventually shatter. Verdict, the adjudicator declares. Every star seems to dim. Ascendant law is upheld. A collective gasp. Kelt V exhales in relief. With amendment, the gasp becomes something else entirely. Ruling, No sapient species may be compelled to sacrifice life under threat of extinction. Shockwaves. Ruling. All governed species are granted standing to challenge. Ascendant law. Panic. Ruling. The ascendancy is hereby subject to external review. Silence. Not the calm kind. The kind that follows a gunshot in a crowded room. Kelt Ve collapses not physically, but socially. The glyphs that marked it as supreme authority dim to archival gray. The ascendancy has not fallen, but it has been bound. The adjudicator turns to humanity. Subject species, humanity. Compliance acknowledged. Your lawyer inclines their head. On behalf of our clients, they say, we accept. The adjudicator fades. The courtroom dissolves. And across the galaxy, something unprecedented happens. The ascendancy does not retaliate, because it cannot. Every enforcement action now requires justification. Every demand can be appealed. Every subject species now knows the rules are not divine. They are negotiable. In the weeks that follow, humanity becomes something new, not conquerors, not saviors, consultants. Worlds invite human advisors to rewrite charters. Species hire human firms to audit ancient treaties. Former vassals form coalitions not to fight, but to legislate. The ascendancy still exists, but it is no longer inevitable. Kelt Ve sends one final message. You have changed the balance. You reply simply. No, you say. We read it. Years later, historians will argue whether this was humanity's greatest victory. Some will say it was the moment war was avoided. Others will say it was the birth of a fairer galaxy. But you know the truth. The galaxy learned something terrifying that day. Humans don't rebel. Humans don't submit. Humans appeal. And when the universe says, you must die, humanity says, show us where it says that.